The light-hearted strains of an old Dutch folk song welcome us to the land of wooden shoes, windmills, tulips, and the Zuider Zee. This is your guide, Hans Conried, taking you in our first picture to the historic port city of Amsterdam. 700 years ago, it was a tiny fishing village, but today it is the capital of the Netherlands, a land whose people over the centuries have managed to combine a spirit of thrift and industry with a rare sense of harmony and repose. This peaceful scene is typical. Sun-warmed and time-mellowed buildings line up at the dock like stout Dutch burghers, while the soft, rich light reflected in the waters of the Ezel River reminds us of the golden tones of Rembrandt, who lived and painted here in Amsterdam hundreds of years ago. Behind the buildings, we see the spires of the Church of St. Nicholas, patron saint of sailors. The Dutch, of course, are a famous seafaring people. Now let's move to our second picture for a scene that makes us think of Venice. For Amsterdam, too, is a floating city built of small islands, and a network of 40 canals called grachten winds through the city. There are no gondolas, but you can enjoy a trip in a glass-roofed excursion boat, gliding past the stately homes of 18th century merchant princes and ducking beneath picturesque little bridges that cross the tree-lined banks. When night falls, take a stroll, in picture 3, around the Times Square of Amsterdam. This is the Leidseplein, a kind of miniature Broadway. Here you can sample all the pleasures of a cosmopolitan city: theaters, nightclubs, cafes. When you've built up a hearty appetite, you're ready to visit one of Amsterdam's fine restaurants, like the one shown in our next picture. A cozy atmosphere of fireplaces and cheerful service, a savory spread to choose from, a glass of wine or the famous Dutch beer to wash it down. This is a matchless recipe for pleasure. The menu is a thick vegetable soup prepared with pork and sausage. The Dutch call it snert. You may be more familiar with it by the name of pea soup. But the Dutch provide food for the soul as well as the body. And picture 5 takes us to the Netherlands National Gallery, the Rijksmuseum, where we see Rembrandt's Night Watch. It has been called the most valuable painting in the world. Over the centuries, Dutch masters such as Rembrandt, Hals, Vermeer have enriched almost beyond measure the artistic heritage of civilization. People come from all over the world to stand enraptured before such immortal masterpieces as this. In number 6, we see another example of the Dutch talent for creating things of beauty. Turning a rough diamond into an exquisite, many-faceted jewel is an art in itself. The slightest error in sawing or cutting can destroy the value of a priceless stone. This young lady is using a magnifying glass to examine the work of a master, one of the famous diamond cutters of Amsterdam. The look of pleasure on her face reminds us that diamonds are a girl's best friend. And now, in picture 7, we've left Amsterdam for the northern province of Friesland, and a look at one of the most colorful Dutch pastimes. When lakes and rivers freeze over, the whole country takes to the ice. Youngsters race along on old-fashioned wooden skates or modern steel ones. Grandparents glide about in stately fashion. Butcher, baker, candlestick maker, everybody skates. Frozen water is no problem, but the pounding waves and the tides of the sea are a constant threat to this little land below sea level. In number 8, we see one of the famous dikes that hold back the sea, stretching 20 miles across the neck of the Zuider Zee. If it weren't for thousands of miles of dikes and dunes along the coast, half the nation would be flooded at every high tide. I struggle and emerge is the motto of one of the country's provinces. Most of what we call Holland is land actually stolen from the grasp of the sea over the centuries by driving the waters back, always back. The contest still goes on. And if you will turn the slide card over to picture 9, we will see a piece of man-made land. Once beneath the waters of the fast-disappearing Zuider Zee, this area has been reclaimed and turned into watertight compartments of land called polders. Where once there was desolation, thriving farms have sprung up, providing a huge granary for the Netherlands. Grain raised on the farms is ground in windmills, and we see one in our next picture, silhouetted against a blue sky. Here is the national symbol of Holland. To us, windmills represent quaintness and charm, but to the Dutch, they've been indispensable for generations, grinding corn and helping to drain the country. Millers have developed a kind of sail code over the centuries. passing information through the movement of those wooden arms from mill to mill, from local gossip to calls for more work, a kind of commercial by windmill. Picture 11 shows us a scene that makes us feel the modern world is a distant dream. Two men carry turkeys across a rustic bridge in the ancient town of Hindelopen. Here is that sense of harmony and serenity which is so much part of the Dutch tradition. The women in the center are dressed in their regional costumes. In number 12, we see a close-up of a beaming Dutch housewife, all dressed up for the weekend. Marken is famous for its picturesque outfits. This woman wears several layers of skirts, aprons, and tightly laced corsets. She doesn't have to worry about catching cold. The doll she carries is dressed in much the same fashion, even to the bonnet-like headgear. Her husband probably wears knee breeches, a vest, and klompen, or wooden shoes. Dressed like that, they would seem right at home on the cobblestone streets of the town shown in our next picture. Delft is one of the most charming spots in Holland. It radiates the atmosphere of a 17th century Dutch town. Vermeer, that famous painter of quiet beauty and soft light, lived here. The scenes he immortalized on canvas have changed little. The trees mirrored in the still waters of the canal, the miniature bridge, the mellow old houses and quiet streets. This beauty is reflected in the world-famous porcelain of Delft. In number 14, we see a craftsman hand-painting a piece of fine Delft pottery. The secrets of coloring, mixing the clay, and decorating have been jealously guarded for generations. Many of the graceful designs were inspired by objects brought home by the Dutch sailors from Japan and China. Speaking of design, take a look at the fantastic street organ in picture 15. It's a far cry from the little barrel organs we're used to. The organ grinder can make it play Spanish tangos and Italian serenades as well as Dutch clog dances. The fascinated child doesn't seem to care so long as it's music. One of the greatest heroes of Holland was a little boy, very much like the one shown in number 16. According to legend, the boy plugged a hole in the dike at Haarlem with his finger and stayed at his post all night long. Until at dawn, the people awoke to find that he had saved the town. Near Haarlem, a statue has been erected to the boy's memory. Its inscription reads, dedicated to our youth, to honor the boy who symbolizes the eternal struggle of Holland against the sea. Dedication and endurance, the spirit of a boy and of a nation. If you will turn the record over now and go to picture 17, we will visit a remarkable museum. In our 17th picture, we are at Arnhem, near the Rhine River. This little bridge is part of a unique open-air museum. Over there, on a pleasantly wooded hill, are gathered from all over Holland objects and buildings which best express the national character. You can see farm interiors, fishermen's huts, country ovens, smithies, even a transplanted street. Arnhem is famous for another bridge besides this one. During World War II, 6,000 British and Polish troops died trying to keep the Germans from blowing it up before the main body of the Allied army arrived. The Bridge of Martyrs was eventually captured and destroyed by the Germans, but the heroism of its gallant defenders lives on in memory. In our next picture, these abandoned cannons remind us that Holland took a heavy pounding during the bombings and airborne landings of the last war. But the storybook castle in the background survived the war, as it had many others through the centuries. In bygone days, Dutch ladies fair waved goodbye from the tall windows of the castle as their knights in armor rode forth on the crusades. Number 19 takes us from the romantic days of chivalry to a modern, down-to-earth cheese market. But for a gourmet, delicious Dutch cheeses are the height of romance. Those being laid out for sale here weigh more than 4 pounds each and look like old-fashioned cannonballs. Some of the cheeses shown here may be exported to our country and land in your supermarket. Our next picture shows the stately Peace Palace in The Hague, the city where the Dutch government has its headquarters. This granite structure is a symbol of international cooperation. In 1913, an American, Andrew Carnegie, gave $1.5 million to build it, and 11 nations contributed toward its decoration. This is the home of the International Court of Justice, where nations can settle their differences peacefully by submitting to impartial arbitration. The hope of the world may well lie with such concepts as the Peace Palace. We turn now from the larger view to an enchanted miniature world in picture 21. On the outskirts of The Hague is Madurodam, the smallest town in the world. This composite of buildings found all over the Netherlands is Holland seen through the wrong end of a telescope. There are Lilliputian shops, farms, factories, tiny ships in a tiny harbor, even a zoo. If you want to feel like a giant, here's the place to do it. Nearby in our next picture is a seaside pleasure resort that has much in common with our own Atlantic City or Miami Beach. Broad beaches, gay hotels and nightclubs, smart restaurants, the perfect spot for a salt air holiday. The bicycles remind us that in a flat country like Holland, cycling is the ideal means of transportation. Between bicycles and ice skates, the Dutch don't need setting up exercises to stay in shape. And now in picture 23, we come to Rotterdam. This grim statue called May 1940 commemorates that Black Tuesday when Nazi bombers destroyed the city, reducing over 28,000 buildings to rubble. The figure is a bronze woman, her body torn and broken, holding up her hands against the rain of death from the sky. But behind this symbol of darkness and despair rise the gleaming steel and glass buildings of modern Rotterdam. The rebirth of this great city is a tribute to the incredible energy and determination of its citizens. No wonder Queen Wilhelmina has given to Rotterdam the motto, Sterker door strijd, stronger through struggle. Our 24th view is the modern harbor of Rotterdam, second largest seaport in the world. It was rebuilt after World War II with Marshall Plan aid. In a sense, the money was the repayment of a long-standing debt, for it was the Dutch who gave our pilgrim fathers a haven from persecution before they set sail for the New World. And now, if you will turn the slide card over to picture 25, we will visit the charming fishing village of Enkhuizen. A church, cottages, a boat, the traditional life of the Zuider Zee folk. In spring, as the women mend nets, the men begin to feel herring sick, which is to say they long to put to sea. This is a signal for spring cleaning, the energetic scrubbing and painting of their boats. On a Sunday, the church offers special prayers for the safe return of all, and the next day the fleet puts to sea while the men's families wave Godspeed. If the fishing season in the North Sea is a good one, barrels such as those in number 26 will be filled to the brim with tasty, tangy herring. When cured, these little fish are popular for lunches, dinners, or between-meal snacks all over Holland. 1 billion herring may be caught in a good year, and the first barrel is traditionally offered to the Queen. Hollanders love to show the affection they bear the royal family. For example, our 27th picture shows a parade in honor of the Queen's birthday. Here they pass before her country palace of Soestdijk. In the background, we hear the Dutch national anthem. The Netherlands is a constitutional monarchy, and its citizens have a proud tradition of democracy which extends as far back as the 16th century. The Queen is a symbol of unity, but the country is actually governed by an elected parliament and a cabinet. The Queen's birthday comes in April, and here, banked on the steps of her palace, are some of the flowers for which Holland is famous. Our next picture takes us to the beautiful Keukenhof Gardens. Once part of a baronial estate, these enchanted bowers and groves are now open to the public. Lovers may stroll along the garden paths hand in hand, surrounded by a blaze of color, breathing the perfumed air. Many a proposal is made in surroundings like these. When a Dutch couple marries, they may settle in a charming little house like the one in picture 29. Under the peaked roof, chinaware glistens on the shelves, and the atmosphere is full of gezelligheid, a Dutch word that suggests laughing children, a family grouped around a kitchen table. In short, the warm and cozy pleasures of the home. The brilliant bed of flowers in front of the house tells us that its owner is one of Holland's 25,000 full-time bulb growers. In picture 30, we see a field of blossoms that is like a vision of heaven. The bulb fields are crisscrossed with canals, and the young man is carrying off the flower harvest on a barge. The bulbs left behind will be shipped all over the world. Any gardener will tell you that the remarkable varieties of tulips and other flowers developed by Dutch bulb scientists have few, if any, peers. The science of horticulture reflects the Dutch philosophy of life, beauty created through the patient mastery of nature. Some of this young man's flowers may find their way onto a garlanded float, and we see a handsome example in our next picture. Flowers, flowers everywhere. This is the famous flower festival in April, after the harvest. Hundreds of magnificent creations like this testify to Dutch ingenuity and industry. for bulbs represent a $60 million a year export business. But the most cherished blossoms in Holland are revealed in our final picture. This is a land of well-loved children. Golden-haired, rosy-cheeked, they will grow up in an atmosphere of hard-won freedom, of cheerful industry, of glowing health. They will be efficient and practical, but they will also learn to appreciate flowers, works of art, the pleasure and companionship of family life. This is their inheritance from a fascinating land wrested from the sea.
We are 30 miles from Tokyo, gazing at the most famous statue in all Japan, the great bronze Buddha of Kamakura. In Japan, the serving of tea has been raised to the level of a high art, and the ability to perform the tea ritual with delicacy and precision is a mark of the cultivated Japanese. It reflects poise, harmony, and courtesy. Our next slide shows us three of the most famous monkeys in the world. In the 17th century, the trio was supposed to represent India, China, and Japan. But we know it more familiarly as hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. The sumo dog. It was named after the famous sumo wrestlers, giant Japanese men weighing from 250 to 450 pounds, who win bouts by forcing opponents to touch the ground with any part of their body other than their feet. And now, we meet the fabled geisha girls at last. They are highly trained artists. Geisha means cultured person, who have served a long, hard apprenticeship in singing, dancing.
You have just seen and heard a little of the Panorama Unit on Japan, narrated by Edward R. Murrow. This is one of 12 units in the Panorama Travel Program.
Miss Clark, what is the Panorama Program?
Panorama is a book, film strip, and record program that I'm finding very useful in teaching. Come, I'll show you. First, the subject matter. These are the countries covered: Japan, Italy, Greece, England, Hawaii, Holland, Thailand, the Holy Land, Soviet Union, India, the Philippines, France. This is not only a study guide, it is much more. It is a genuinely beautiful book for classroom use by both teachers and pupils. In the front of the book, there is a map that gives you an orientation to every picture in the unit. And every book opens with a thorough introduction, covering important historical facts and other general information about a country. Then there is a full page for every frame of the film strip, and the film strip picture is reproduced on the page for easy and accurate identification. Some pages have extra pictures. In the back of the book, there is a page of famous names in the history of the country, a page of important dates, and last, a page of common words and phrases, together with accurate but simple phonetics. Teachers will be glad to know that each book has a record pocket, so that the record and book will always be together. This Panorama Unit on France is narrated by Charles Boyer. Each unit is narrated by a distinguished person, a well-known authority: Edward R. Murrow, Harrison Salisbury, Basil Rathbone, Lowell Thomas, Hans Conried, David Wayne, Arthur Godfrey, General Carlos Romulo, and Vincent Price.
Now we know what the Panorama Program is. Will you tell us about its values?
One important point is that the Panorama Program helps me make better use of my own travel experience. I should tell you that before I present the lesson, I read the book, and especially the introduction, which is very comprehensive. This helps me motivate the lesson with enthusiasm and assurance. So please turn out the lights and listen to Vincent Price.
The young fisherman demonstrates that children the world over are fascinated by trains. Greece is an extremely hilly country, and train tracks often run close to the water's edge where the land is level. Our next picture shows us one of the primitive household looms that the women use. In number 22, we see a typical street scene in a little Greek village. A countrywoman rides to market on her donkey, which at another time might be seen hauling that brightly painted cart. Picture 23 shows us a simple fisherman's hut, gilded by the rising sun. The water, the sky, the distant mountain. Here is a scene that reflects the tranquility and mystery of nature.
One of the great values of the Panorama program is its currency. When these materials were produced, every effort was made to obtain the most recent pictures and information. The quality of the books, records, and film strips speaks for itself. Let me show you a few pictures from Holland, England, the Holy Land, India, and Thailand.
This is all very convincing, Miss Clark. You've talked about the content, currency, and quality of the Panorama program. But the most significant question of all is, what are its actual curriculum values?
I'm glad you asked that question. Our students are eager for information about other countries and people, how they live, what kind of work they do, the climate, the land, their food, methods of travel, and many other things. Here is slide 26 from Japan, 25 from Thailand, and 19 from the Philippines. What do these tell us about the climate and the food? Obviously that these countries have areas with similar conditions favorable to rice growing, and that rice is one of their most important foods and products. With this kind of motivation, it is easy to get into a study of other places in the world where rice is the essential food and the main item in trade. In contrast, we have slide 26 from the Soviet Union, and 28 and 29 from Greece that tell us that these are wheat and corn countries. On the subject of food, look at the many pictures that tell about fish and fishing in France, Holland, Italy, the Philippines, Thailand, and then one from Japan showing that fish are so important that they appear as gay festival kites. I told you that in the introduction of these beautiful panorama books, there's useful information about the history of each country. There's information that relates to the history of our country, too. In the book on Italy, it's the story of Columbus, and this is a slide of his birthplace in Genoa. The panorama units are so rich in subject matter. There are nearly 400 beautiful pictures in the film strips. We haven't even mentioned arts and crafts and architecture. Here is a sample of what you can expect to find in this curriculum area. Greece has a wealth of wonderful ancient art and architecture. Everyone wants to go to France to see the jewel-like windows of Chartres and the treasures of the Louvre. The woodblock artist in Japan, the woodcarver in Thailand, and this one in the Philippines shows us modern and primitive Oriental crafts. See what we have learned about the world by the time we have toured 12 countries on the magic carpet of Panorama.
Miss Clark, we certainly have covered a lot of territory. And it's quite apparent that the Panorama program reaches many subject matter areas and many grade levels. Do you have anything to say about other advantages of the Panorama program?
Well, we teachers, like school administrators, prefer having audio-visual materials conveniently located in our own schools. The Panorama program meets this requirement because of its compactness and because it fits the budgets of most schools. And there are these very important teaching values. The Panorama program is very effective for individual study, for group study, for individual reading and research, and for learning through listening.
Miss Clark has told us about the many values of the Panorama program in teaching. Here's how you can buy it. Each of the 12 titles is sold as a complete unit, consisting of a book, a record, and a standard film strip. You can order as few as 6 units at $7.50 each. You can order all or any 12 units for $78. As you can see, an order for 12 or more Panorama units saves you $1 a unit over the smaller order prices. The quality of all books, records, and film strips is guaranteed. If you are not satisfied after you have examined them, they may be returned within 10 days for full credit. We hope you will enjoy happy traveling and teaching with Panorama.